Welcome and greetings to our online guests from KubeCon and the CloudNativeCon North America in Detroit. Welcome to today's conversation. I'm Bennett Richardson. I'm the president of Protocol, and excited to welcome you all to our upcoming editorial conversation with It's Not Privacy versus Security Anymore. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation for making today's event possible. At Protocol, we aim to arm you as decision makers in technology and business with the news and analysis that you need to help you do your jobs. I think this topic is really key in that direction. In recent years, privacy and security executives and the budgets they control have grown significantly, right? As organizations have worked to stymie the growing threat of cyber attacks and really navigate the ever-changing landscape of data and data regulation. But good privacy and security strategies are often as much about the people as they are about the policy. And the push and pull between those two remits can sometimes create friction within organizations. So with today's event, we're going to explore how some of those roles interact, how the Chief Privacy, Chief Information Security Officer roles will evolve, and how each can support the other best when the company needs it most. Really glad you could join us in the room today and that you all could tune in today. To kick things off, we've got a great executive panel here to talk a little bit more about that and to talk about that journey to cloud native with the Cloud Native Computing Foundation and two great guests. I'm joined by Priyanka Sharma, our Executive Director of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, Pratik Water, SVP of Product Development for Intuit, and Amr Abdelhalem, Head of Cloud Platforms at Fidelity Investments. Great group to talk with. And I'd love just to kick things off very quickly to hear about each of your roles and what's brought you here to KubeCon and to the CTO Summit. Priyanka, I know a little bit about what's brought you here, but we'd love to hear maybe what you're excited about this year.
Yes, sure. Thank you for asking. So as Ben said, I am Priyanka Sharma, and I'm the Executive Director of the Cloud Native Computing Foundation, or CNCF, as we affectionately call it. What do I do in my job? Well, sometimes cat herding, sometimes lion taming, sometimes doing this. It's a very, very diverse job, but the TLDR is we are here as stewards of an amazing set of open source projects, with Kubernetes being our flagship. And our goal is to make cloud native ubiquitous, and we do that by supporting our maintainers, by promoting the technologies through events like KubeCon CloudNativeCon, and then arming people with research and information so they can modernize their technology stack with initiatives such as CTO Summit.
Amazing. Thank you. Pratik, tell us.
Yeah, Pratik Water, SVP of Product Development at Intuit. I'm responsible for Intuit's SaaS platform and the development platform. So that pretty much includes everything that powers our products, like TurboTax, QuickBooks, Mint, Credit Karma, MailChimp. So if you have any problems with those, you can call me, I guess. Don't. But my journey here has been, Intuit's been on a cloud native transformative journey. We've been on it about 4 years, still going on. And over the 4 years, we've moved away from on-prem data centers to fully running in the cloud, running on Kubernetes, primarily using open source projects. So that's really what brings me here. I've been a long-time user of a lot of the CNCF projects, and also a contributor. The Argo project, which some of you may know, was created at Intuit, and is something that we support and continue to support.
Great. Amr.
Thank you. Amr Abdelhalem. I'm heading the cloud platform team at Fidelity. Very focused in cloud enablement and including the container, the API, the observability, event streaming, DevOps tools, and others. Why I'm here, I'm actually here, it's home, right? So since maybe 2017, KubeCon in 2019, we're in stage, like when Fidelity joined and announced actually their multi-cloud strategy. And since then, like almost like 4 years right now, and pandemics and others, but we made it, so we have over 5,700 applications running today in the multi-cloud. So definitely I'm here to collaborate and, connect and see what's new, and, part of that as well as we start contributing to the open source community. So Fidelity today is one of the contributors for the Envoy Gateway project as well. So that's definitely, our next phase in the journey.
That's great. Thank you all for doing this. And you all both talked a little bit about your cloud journey, so I'd love to start there. Pratik, I think it'd be fascinating to think about the product perspective. You described that 4-year journey that you all have been on. What has been the biggest impact or the biggest game changer for you as you've navigated that journey to being a cloud native company?
I think the best way to look at this is we measure, we started measuring this in terms of development productivity or development velocity. The way we define development velocity is actually what gets shipped to our customers. So we actually measure every release, whether it's an internal release going or something that hits our customers. As we've been taking on this journey and moving all of our capabilities, what we've observed is a 6x increase in development velocity. So it's a number that we started measuring at the beginning, and we continue to measure that. So we've seen a 6x increase. But I think the biggest thing that we have seen is what it has allowed us to unlock. So inner source contributions, we measure like how can teams contribute to other capabilities that are being built. Inner source contribution has increased almost 2x since we started measuring it. We have set ourselves a goal of becoming an AI-driven expert platform. And when we started, we did not have an idea about what we would be doing. But today, we're running about 58 billion ML predictions per day. We do 730 million customer predictions a year. So those are the kind of things that I don't think would have been possible if we had not been on a common platform and had the scale that we achieve now, right? And I think those are the biggest benefits that we're beginning to see now on the platform. Right?
That's great. That's great. And Amr, I want to ask you a version of the same question, but a little different. There's a lot of different steps on this journey to bring a company into the cloud, and obviously balancing privacy and security, as we're going to talk about with the panel in a minute, is a key one of them. How have you, as Fidelity, has navigated your own journey? Like, how have you addressed those different steps? What have been some of the big milestones as you all have brought the company into becoming more cloud native?
Sure. And one of the principles in Fidelity, actually, it was used today in the keynote, by the way, invest. So we have to think as investors, and we did invest in building these foundations, building all this foundational service to move to the cloud, relying on open source technology, relying building the whole ecosystem that will enable our application to land safely and securely in these clouds. That was the biggest steps for us. With that, it become journey for how to build, as Bernard was saying, better time to market, how to improve the resiliency in the cloud, how to manage elasticity and having that extra bandwidth and extra compute we needed during events in the market and others. That's another benefit that we had during this time as well. The journey for all our application, when you count about 5,700 application moving in 3 or 4 years, is not easy. So you have to build maturity system as well about those, and you have to start thinking about these applications journey. Are you refactoring them? Are you shifting, lifting? Are you re-platforming? And how and why? And again, thinking as investors, there is an area where we have to refactor and you have to rebuild and design, and some areas where you think it's okay to move the application as is right now, and later might be rethinking about that.
That's great. No, that investor mindset is really interesting to think about as you go into that. Wanted to bring us back to our topic for our next panel, which is balancing and aligning privacy and security. And I would love to get some advice from each of you about how you think about aligning privacy and security in the work you do. Priyanka, I'd love to start with you. What are you hearing about and thinking about in that space?
Sure. What I hear and am perceiving in the space is that privacy and security are intertwined. They're not at odds with each other in the technology reality that we live in today. And this is where a lot of projects, open source projects such as Spiffy, Spire, or OPA come into play, because your encryptions, whether you're doing it with certificates or tokens, become really important. Also, what are the overall policies that you have set up? It becomes really important. And I think you need to think of that in the context of the security of the privacy efforts that you take in the context of the security plans. at least what I hear from folks, it's not that they are completely different and disconnected from each other. But that may be the ultra-modern, cloud-native thought process. I'm sure Amr and Pratik can share more what they're seeing.
So I think, that shift in mindset from like security is like one step in the process toward it had to be baked inside the whole life cycle of that product journey was one of the biggest things that we achieved during this. So, I mean, in the stage here, like, most of the tax return, including mine, is happening through containers, right, in this case. And most of the 401ks and the trading system is happening through containers as well. So it's very critical that we take that very seriously. So including that, like from all the way from your build process to your deployment, your automation, into your runtime, like including all the integration that you need to have with your ecosystem in the backends, that's all need to be baked inside the platforms when you build this.
Great.
Yeah, actually, we had long discussion about this just in the earlier session. But I think privacy and security definitely go hand in hand. When you start talking about security, with Amr as well as with me, Intuit being a fintech company, data security, PII, all of these things become, are at the forefront of any product that you build. So when you start the development journey all the way from beginning to write code, testing it, going into production, being in production, there are various tools and techniques that we use to sort of monitor the tools and for data security. Privacy is very important. Customer profiles, customer identification, identity, all of these things, when you start thinking about the scale of products, like we have 6 products or probably more, and as they go, as customers move from one product to another, making sure that the privacy is maintained, the data security is maintained. Those are not things that you can just do individually or in silos. So you have to have a very sound technological platform that's actually tied into your development platform to do that. And I think that's something that, as we were discussing, where CNCF and some of these projects that are now beginning to see actually can be very beneficial to a lot of us.
Definitely. Thank you. And I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for joining us.
May
Priyanka, one
I-
final
Yes.
parting thought, please.
If I
please.
may, I just want to share
Yeah.
with folks where we are, what we're doing, if that's all right. So we're all gathered here today at the CTO Summit at KubeCon CloudNativeCon, and we have folks such as Amr, Pratik leading our conversation here because as we're talking about privacy, security, all of these are meaty. This is like the highest level topic, right? Then you have to go into the details of exactly how does your business deal with those. And we've started these CTO summits where end users such as Fidelity, Intuit, and many others that are in the room can come together and have a private conversation in a secure space about how they are handling these challenges in their organizations, because we've all just got each other to learn from.
Absolutely. No, thank you. And thank you again for hosting us all here today. And excited to turn it over to our panel. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Kyle Alsbach, our senior reporter, lead on cybersecurity at Protocol, also one of the co-authors of Protocol Enterprise, to introduce our panel and keep things going. So Kyle, come on up. Thank you all.
All right. Well, thanks, Bennett. As Bennett said, I'm Kyle Alsbach, senior reporter at Protocol. And I'm really excited to speak with the panelists today on our topic, security and privacy, and how those two things intersect. So before we dive into this, I would love to just have each of the panelists just introduce yourselves quickly. So start with Jacob. All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jacob DePriest. I'm the Deputy Chief Security Officer at GitHub, where I'm responsible for managing the day-to-day of our security team, which includes our security operations, infrastructure, product security, and governance, risk, and compliance, and also our outreach and security research team.
Hi, I'm Deepak. I'm CTO at D2IQ. I'm responsible for both on the engineering side, working through the product line and organization security, and also on the product that we are building for our customers, making sure that product is secure out of box, and talk more about it, I guess, today.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elise Hulick. I am the Chief Privacy Officer at Intuit. and responsible for all the things. So we've got, data responsibility, we've got data governance, we've got product development, security and cybersecurity, data management in-house in our products and services, and really excited to be here to talk to you about it.
Hello, everybody. My name is Chris Burrows. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Rocket Companies. So you'll think of Rocket Mortgage, Amrock, the old Quicken Loans. We support 13 different of the fintech companies owned by Dan Gilbert. So happy to share what we're doing and learn from the others on the panel.
Great, thank you so much. I'm just going to jump in where Priyanka, left off in the first panel with security and privacy just being so intertwined now as they are. I would love to hear, I really want to get into how everyone's navigating that and how your teams are, interacting with each other and just navigating this new intersection between security and privacy. So, maybe just, to start, Chris, maybe since you're holding the mic, I would love to just hear, how are the security team and the privacy team interacting with each other? How much has that changed, and what kinds of things have changed in terms of, the intersection between those two teams and what you do every day?
Sure. So we made some major changes this year. Going public a couple years ago changed our obligations from a regulatory perspective. So we worked a lot closer with legal, but we started a couple new initiatives where our privacy people are meeting with InfoSec almost on a daily basis, talking about where the rubber hits the road and what we're doing from a team member perspective, from a client perspective. But the one change we made this year was we created this group we call it the Information Governance Group. So we brought not only legal, which is privacy, InfoSec, which is me, our data SVP, our technology SVP, our risk SVP, and our CTO. So the CIO is more operational, the CTO is more forward-looking. So we meet twice a week, and we have for over 6 months talking about the biggest initiatives, whether they are regulation coming from government affairs, or they're a new thing that we're working operationally to share products between these 13 different companies. So it's amazing. So there's been some light bulb moments. Some of our members have said that, well, I thought InfoSec fixed all the stuff. And I said, no, we find all the stuff. We tell technology to go fix all the things that we find. And we do it together with some input from privacy and technologists. So I tell you that the biggest change has been the technology engineers have always been doing the work, but the lack of visibility across the senior leaders hasn't been there. So there's been some great collaboration. It's an effort to get general counsel, CTO, CIO, CISO all in a room, and we're typically in the same room twice a week for 6 months. That we've had some amazing decisions. It's not just been talk. We define it, we talk about it, we vote on it, and we bring in even other groups such as internal audit to help us guide the way. So it's bringing all these groups together. It's made a tremendous difference in our actions and responsibility across the companies.
Awesome, thank you. Elise, would love to go to you.
Yeah, I happen to sit in legal as well. Privacy has sort of evolved over time and can sit in a couple of different spots in different companies. So you may see it in compliance, you may see it in risk. I happen to sit in legal. And so, I think historically, I would say in my career even, there's always been some level of connectivity, right? At the end of the day, we're all worried about and trying to maintain the systems and the data in the systems together. And I think where I've seen things evolve and probably a little bit more acceleration in terms of the relationship really happened during the pandemic and sort of the transformation of the workforce and how we all collaborate together in reliance on more technology tools and different ways to interact and keep businesses going using the same data, using the same technology. And so I think certainly before, I was very, very closely connected with my CISO and their team. But even through that evolution and sort of keeping the trains running, keeping the lights on, keeping things going, and still innovating and doing it in a safe and secure way, that brought about quite a bit of collaboration and change for our organizations.
Terrific.
Thank you. I would take a step back and elaborate on the 3 trends that we have seen that has triggered this closer collaboration. One is data. More and more organizations are collecting more and more data. because they are analyzing, the applications are becoming intelligent and smarter. They are customizing the experiences, user experiences based on the data that they are collecting. So there's more data that is being generated than previously or a few decades back. The second trend is because there's more data, there is also regulations that are coming in. There is more regulations. Each state in the United States is having its own regulations. We also have heard about GDPR as a regulations. That is another trend. And the third one is the attacks are going much deeper into the supply chain of the software, right? So that is fueling this collaboration between privacy and security, because what used to earlier happen is if an organization used to clear some compliance, it used to be on paper, but not really in practice. Slightly offending in saying that, but now it has become a necessity that whatever privacy policy that the CPO is deciding has to be implemented by the CSO. So they have to work closely, and they have to make sure that the privacy and security are working hand in hand.
It's a great example. Thank you. Jacob, would love to hear.
Yeah, so the way I think about this a bit is about trust when it comes to customer trust, public trust. I think most folks have heard of GitHub. We have 90 million users, but we also have 4 million organizations. And so the only reason that that continues is, as with most companies, is trust and transparency and how we build that in. And I think about that when I think about privacy and security. And so whether it's customer privacy of the data that people choose to store on our platform, and some of it's, their sensitive intellectual property, or it's employee privacy of, the thousands of employees we have at GitHub, and we have to protect their health information and their benefits information, things like that. Or it's our compliance, and not just checking it off, but actually enforcing it and making sure it's there. And all of that comes down to trust, I think. And how do we build that? How do we maintain it? And when we do see things, how do we disclose it? And how do we get it out and make sure that, that this is an evolving space? And how do we continue to level up both with the industry, but also internally with our controls, and how we talk about it with our employees, how we talk about it with ourselves, how we talk about it with our leadership. And so I think it is intertwined for us. I talk to our legal team every day, but also some of the data privacy engineering work happens in the security team. So it's all together, and it's all a joint commitment for us.
Terrific. Thank you. Well, I'd love to go back to Chris. You gave that great example. Your team's security and privacy teams are meeting, frequently now. And I would love to just hear, what are some of the lessons you've learned during that time? How have you navigated some of the, issues that might pop up, or what even are some of those issues?
Yeah, so thanks. So one of the things that we really learned is talking about what the policies are. The policies executable. There's no real reason to create a policy that you can't follow up on. So bringing in the technologists, bringing in the InfoSec, the risk people, talking about, is this a reasonable level of security? And then adopting it for the company. Just because there's a guideline does not mean you need to implement what the guideline says. It's a guideline, and that's the challenge. This is so new for people. They think, well, NIST says X, so I need to do what NIST says. No, you don't. You can take those guidelines and implement the intent of that control, and it could be different for each organization. Harder to manage, but if that's what you're doing, you're solving your clients' problems, not your own problems. That's what we're learning is don't solve the data engineer's problem on the DLP side. Solve for what the mortgage banker has the problem with, and how can we better solve that? So basically pulling in the right resources to create the right policies that are executable, and not just throwing over the fence, because that's what happens, and then people just don't talk. So getting them all in the room, you pull 75 engineers together, again, twice a week outside those senior leaders, and we talk about what can we reasonably do, and it's paid off. And in 2 weeks, we decide on what we're going to do. So it's not a 2-year thing. We've got 2 meetings, and that's how we do it. So those are the lessons learned: is make a decision, get input from everybody, and then go forward.
Great. Well, Elisa, I would love to hear, your thoughts on that. But, maybe you could also get into, are there certain challenges between the privacy and the security teams, or are there certain tensions? Are there areas where things are like overlapping and it's not clear who does what? Anything you could say on that?
Sure, there can be. I think, again, over time, the reality is that if an organization wants to function in this world right now, there's no escaping the fact, to your point, that data is being proliferated. We're all using it. I think if you want to be the kind of company that is entrusted to use it, then you have to make this a core part of how you do business and how you do your brand. And so while everyone is looking at the same data and the same technology, we're all coming at it from different perspectives. To me, I think that enhances the conversation, right? I like to be in the room where I'm looking at things through my privacy lens, and I'm trying to be very mindful of all of these regulations that are coming down the pike, all of the standards, the expectations of an individual customer, the expectation of a commercial customer, where we are in the ecosystem, all of the different things going on. And I like to be reminded of also the threat environment. Also, technically speaking, these things can't plug in the way that you're trying to make it happen. How can we have that conversation? So I see more collaboration than not. I was trying to think of a good example of where those diverging perspectives can really drive some interesting conversations. And I think when I think about an organization and sort of how do you monitor your systems for things like insider threat, how do you, observe data traffic across your different communication channels and still respect the privacy rights of your employees. That can get exponentially more complicated when you start to leave the United States, and there are different philosophies and regulations and constructs around how you manage employees and their service with you and their information. So I think I will say we've had some robust conversations on that. I think always getting to the right place, but it's definitely a balancing act because you don't want to veer too far on one side where you're opening the door to threatening activity. And on the other side, you don't want to swap in so much information that you are not being mindful of the employee rights of the people whose information you're observing.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Deepak, I would love to hear, just what kinds of challenges, what kinds of, things have come up where there might be some sort of tension or friction between the two sides?
I wouldn't really say there's a friction or tension. It's more about unawareness. Like one, privacy, because we are so focused in the areas that we are good at, is like we sometimes are unaware where we need help in the areas. For example, especially with privacy and security, I see policy meets practice. So policymakers sometimes are unaware. Have they gone so much into policy that it is, as Chris was saying, it's not executable? And similarly, on the execution side, they are not always aware of what all policy to consider. So it's more about being aware that getting the security folks into the room and having those discussions and having collaborations to make sure that the policies are covered. Similarly, when the security folks are meeting, getting the privacy folks into the room and making sure that whatever things they are putting in place. Because as I was saying previously, that data, wherever it's generated, might be more known to the security people, and policy people might not be aware of that. And so having them in the same room and having that collaboration and discussion, make sure that the organizations are covering their ground in terms of privacy and security.
Great,
Yeah.
Thank you. Jacob, I'd love to hear if you have something to add.
Sure. I think very, very similar to what you were saying. I think it is about how we leverage the strengths of each team. And so one of the things we've been talking about a lot is the security team does a lot of fan-out work with our engineering and product teams because we're so intertwined in shipping secure features and securing the infrastructure. And so how can we leverage those paved paths that we've built, the relationships we've built, to do the same thing with privacy and the compliance around that, and not try to create a whole separate pathway, because they are intertwined and a lot of the controls are similar. And if you add a lot of privacy controls in, but don't add the security controls on top of it, then it only matters so much. And so we have to think about these things together. And so that's the conversation we've been having a lot recently about how do we incorporate the privacy practice into our security paved paths with engineering and product.
Great. Well, Jacob, maybe you can take the next one too. Then, just following up on that. I mean, you're talking about essentially, if I'm hearing right, more alignment between these two teams. And I would love to hear. I mean, are there certain things that you've done to change something within the organization, or certain things you've intentionally done differently in order to get that alignment between those teams?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that I specifically have been talking to our legal team a lot about recently is organizational alignment to follow those pay paths I was talking about before. And so does it make sense for our privacy engineering team to be in security or engineering or in the legal team? Where do we align the resources and the hiring skill sets and the engineering managers to go into all these things? And so we're still working through what that looks like, but ultimately it's all to streamline and get this moving as quickly and as fast as possible to implement the new legal and compliance things that are coming out worldwide all the time. It's changing, so we have to be agile. We have to go after it quickly, much like we have to be agile in the threat landscape on the security side.
Great.
What we have done is bringing in the legal counselor earlier in the development cycle, because many a times when we are writing or developing a software or a product, we might not be aware of the policies or the compliance that the software has to undergo, and having the legal presence in those stand-ups to the level that they are meeting, even more than twice a week, if time permits, helps the broader team to be more aware of these regulations and compliance as they are building products and software. So that has greatly helped us be prepared in advance and not finding these things when the product is already out, because that the later you find it out, the more costlier and more time consuming they are to fix.
Great.
I mean, from my perspective, it also, there's a cultural mindset that you really need to have across the whole organization, because my team can come in with all of the legal smarts and the privacy know-how, and our CISO and our information security team can come in with all of the best and latest about threat detection and whatnot. But you have a whole army of people that are working together day in and day out to build products and services, and they're doing it for someone, right? We keep the customer in mind when we're building things. We start from their perspective and try to come in. What would seem weird to them? What would they expect of us? How can we go above and beyond and do it in a way that is commercially viable, that is scalable across all of these changing laws and regulations, across different geographies, across different business opportunities, and really getting your friends around you to speak the same language, which takes a lot of time of sitting down with product teams, sitting down with compliance teams, risk teams, explaining why this matters, getting the tone from the top set in the right way, so that when you are in the room and you have to have really complicated conversations about whether we use this type of data or that type of data, or we give access in this way or not, or we bring in another third party, at least the mindset is present across the organization to move quickly and make things happen, that you're not trying to convince them or sell them on the idea that privacy is important or security is important.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I was going to say mindset too. In any organization I've been in, it's security is everyone's responsibility, from the clerk to the CEO. And if you get that mindset, you've got 30,000 security warriors at your company, and that makes a huge difference. So one of the things that we did differently, we didn't change the organizational structure, but we communicated a lot more. So we shared risk assessments between the privacy team, their risk assessments, and ours. We made it easier for our clients because they're getting tasked with assessments from privacy, internal audit, NIST, pen test, you name the assessment, and now we started sharing. So I can tell you that nobody saw a pen test before I got into the company outside of our little box of the little black box of people. But we started sharing that with the CTOs of all the 13 companies, because they could learn from what happened at another company. And we have this level of trust and mindset to say we're all in this together. Whether the company is 50 people or 15,000 people, if there's a problem with one company, we have a brand and a trust problem with our clients. So opening up the shared secrets to everybody else, because truly we have, I think, 3,500 technologists at our company, and almost 30,000 team members. If you've got people that care and they understand the why, and that's the key. What's the why? We've gone out and built champions. We've got 350 champions in the business that are advocates for security and privacy and doing the right thing, and then they're telling us what's happening in their environment. So all these little virtual groups of explanations of how they can make a difference, that's what's made the most difference, is asking them how they can make a difference. So it's been fantastic.
Great, that's really interesting. Well, maybe stick with you, Chris. I mean, I would love to hear just in terms of, when these teams are meeting with each other, are you getting to the level of like preparing for an incident, right? Like, are you sort of spending time like walking through, okay, if there is a data breach, which is going to affect both of the teams, are you walking through, okay, who does what in this situation, and who calls who, and just do you kind of walk through that in advance, or what do you do with that?
Oh yeah, so last year alone we ran 2 leader executive tabletops. So we came in and we had the CFO, the CEO, the COOs. I mean, there was probably 50 people in the room, and we facilitated what would happen if we got ransomed. Our stance is we're not going to pay. And then the conversation evolves from there. But our stance is we're not going to pay. Well, if you're at the end of the month and you've got $50 million on the table and you have to pay $5 million, and you're a public company, are you going to pay it? Can you defend that decision? Yes. There's going to be conversations on both sides of the house, but truly we are here to run a business, and we're here for the shareholders. So we run those at the leader level, which is great, having the CEOs in those conversations, and they make the decisions. We don't make them. We tell them the information, and we say, what do you want to do? And some were like, we'll never pay. Okay, well, let's dive in a little bit deeper. And you walk through those conversations that I brought up, and not that I would ever want to pay, but sometimes you may make a different decision. And then on the engineering side and the technical side, the SOC team pulls in other resources, and then we do tabletops for lunch every Friday. So they get through it, and they pick a different leader. There's about 20 people on the team, and they go through and say, what if we had a violation in the cloud container? What would you do? If we had a situation with client records that are being exposed somewhere else, how would you handle it? So not just having one incident commander, but having each person take an incident commander role. That's how you learn. You learn by being in the hot seat, making the decisions, and then we do lessons learned about that. So it's been helpful. And then pulling in the privacy people, pulling in the SOC and SOX people to say, this is how we would handle incidents, to give them some exposure to what happens on the real incident side, not just reading a playbook, which gets updated, once a year or whenever people's names change. Lastly, we meet with the FBI twice a year. We got a meeting next week, and we pull in their special agents in charge. They give us threat intel reports, and then we say, well, how would we handle this if there was such an incident? And we do some tabletopping of those kind of exercises. So all different levels, using external, using internal, and then sharing with our most senior leaders to say, I understand that we would never want to pay. Yes, but there's always other circumstances that you may make a different decision one way or the other. Or it helps us really validate that our response and recoveries are really tight, because those are other tests that we run. Can we restore and recover within the expectation of our BCP plans? Is it a 4-hour turnaround? If not, then we've got some work to do. Right, so testing at all those at all those levels and get everybody engaged has been really, really helpful.
Great. Well, Elisa, I'd love to hear sort of what you're doing, but maybe you could talk a little bit while you do that about, you mentioned the language needs to be common across privacy and security. I mean, when you're doing preparations for, what could happen, incidents, how are you navigating this, possibility that, there's different vocabulary between the two sides?
Yeah, 100%. I think, lawyers are known for being super humble, right? Right? So you got to be humble. You got to get in the room and say, I don't understand this. I need to understand it from a technical perspective, and try. And I will say through the entirety of my career, if you are willing, there are people there who would be more than eager to sit down with you and say, look, this is how this thing works. This is why I care about this. When I'm talking about this type of server, this type of cloud arrangement, this is why this has significance. I am a better lawyer because of those conversations. And I try, on my side, to make the law as accessible as possible. Oftentimes we end the sentence with, but that's crazy, right? And I say, yeah, It is, but this is the perspective of the regulator. This is the perspective of the attorney general who might come around and look at things. This is the expectation of clients who have terms in their contract that seem convoluted, but this is where we landed and this is the implication why. I really feel like trying to find common ground and meet in the middle and being very upfront with, I don't know this, but I'm willing to learn it, will get you there. Now, you need to also pay attention during those sessions, because I will say, going to your technologist and asking these questions is a great and positive experience, but I also don't want to be the attorney who comes back with the same question 55 times, right? Like, it is part now of your job to know how the technology that your entity supports functions, how we manage it, how we look at it, all of the data governance piece that goes on behind the scenes. And as you see, a couple of panelists have talked about sort of the rise of sort of maybe less traditional or newer privacy roles, things like privacy engineers, people who kind of straddle that line and have both the legal acumen and the understanding of the privacy landscape, and also an engineering or a design background and things like that. We see a lot of that, and they are invaluable in sort of sitting in the room and saying, this is what everyone's saying, and this is why we're doing it. So that when an incident happens, something happens, again, you move quickly, because that's not the moment in time to learn. You've got to learn it beforehand so that you can respond when you need to.
Terrific. Thank you.
So the organization that I'm currently working on is slightly different because we don't have a SaaS service. So it's not like we are having a lot of customer data, but then privacy and security still plays a role for the employees of the organization. And there, since it's a very small team, whenever some incident happens, it's the same team that has to handle it. So we don't have many of those problems yet because of the size. But we also depend on third-party technology. Like, for example, when an employee joins or leaves, they often have laptops or computers that they have on their sort of ownership. And how do you protect companies' data on those systems? And things like MDM systems and MDM technology that allows you to erase the data once somebody is terminated or somebody has been temporary as a contractor, not to have company information leak. But I would still say that in terms of preparing for those isn't that big a problem right now for us because of the small size of the team.
I see.
We've talked a little bit about mindset in several cases, and I think there's two aspects I think about in this case. One is, in an incident or when preparing for an incident, the mindset of the team to put customer data and employee data at a really high bar of protection, I think is really important to talk about before, during, and after an incident, so that when something's happening and you're in the heat of the moment, that good decisions are made, or that the default position is protect the data, have a high bar to access data, things like that. So I think that's really important. And I think the other side of that is externally facing communications. For us, we talk a lot about the bar being low to communicate externally when something happens. So we want to communicate, we want to be transparent. When there's an incident or something that's happening, we want to, if you go read some of the security blogs for GitHub, you'll see we put a lot of information out when something happens. And I think those two go hand in hand, again, kind of at all phases of an incident, to have the teams ready to talk about it, using the right language, having the right mindset, and then afterwards to communicate it and build that trust with our customers.
Terrific. Well, I'm going to open this up to anyone, but I mean, what's a lesson you've learned that we haven't talked about, along these lines? Is there anything that's, important that you found out, with the privacy and security intersection that hasn't come up yet?
One thing, I don't know if it is directly related, as software development has changed a little bit, it has become more collaborative open source. We are at CNCF conference, so the software that is being developed is collaboration of many open source technology, and many times you are including code which you have not seen or written. And there, the privacy and security becomes important, and bringing these teams and making them more aware is super important. Is like And I was talking to him just prior to that code scanning or security scanning, which is many times overlooked, is super important. And that's what would help us get more prepared as the attacks are going deeper into the supply chain, is like how we can make the entire software lifecycle much more secure and verifiable, something that we haven't talked about in this panel yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, so we always talk we think a lot and we execute a lot. Where we can add some improvement is communicate. And when you think you've communicated enough, let's try it 8 more times because you have not communicated enough, right? And that's what it really boils down to is we all think, we all have our lenses on, but we fail to communicate what we're trying to solve. And then once you communicate, getting those roles and responsibilities documented, not only for the current team, but the new team, because there's a high turnover of people. So if you already established those roles and responsibilities, everyone's communicated on what they're going to be doing, and then monitor, right? So those are the things that I would say, if you're not doing those, double down on communicate, write down the roles and responsibilities, whether it's the CPO, the CISO, the engineer, the third party, and then make sure that everybody's on the same page, because like you said, you don't want to learn during an incident. You don't want to learn during a finding of a regulatory exam. If you're all on the same page and you're talking often with clear roles and responsibilities, you're setting yourself up for much success.
Maybe one thing I would add is, don't waste the mistakes, right? Things are going to happen that are unexpected. Things are going to turn out in ways that you couldn't have anticipated. It's such a loss of an opportunity to learn if you don't take a beat after something's happened and you've sort of gotten to the other side of it and you've survived it and said, what happened? Can we take a minute now that we can breathe and take a look at it? Where could we have done something differently? Where could we do something a little bit better maybe next time around? I think this space is only going to become more and more fast-paced. There's only going to be more and more demands on your teams to accelerate what they're doing and still maintain super high standards, and really just sort of taking a minute, even on small things that may have gone sideways that we were able to get on top of, great. Is there anything that we could have done differently? Anything that we could have looked at from a different angle? Did we miss something? I always think like it's a really good practice to just quickly take a beat, reflect on what happened, and then, keep it moving. But capitalize on even the things that are say, less successful, and see if you can grow from there, because that's usually where you find really valuable information to extend your project to the next level.
I think the only thing I'll add is I'm a software developer by training, and I think we've seen a huge surge in security being part of software development, more and more being a fluent topic for engineers. And I think we're now in the phase 2 where privacy needs to have and is growing in that same space. I think it's adjacent, but it's really important. And so I'm excited to see that evolve now that we've kind of been moving in this direction with security.
Great. Well, Jacob, you and Elise both just sort of touched on, the future of these issues, but I would love to hear, are there other things, maybe you could say a few words on where you see this going. You kind of just answered it, but are there other things forward-looking on these issues that come to mind?
I mean, I think it's a very real possibility to have things like code scanning and machine learning-based analytics looking at software, looking at APIs, and identifying opportunities or vulnerabilities when it comes to privacy. I don't see any reason why we can't level that up. And I know there is some now. There's many vendors who have offerings in the space, but I don't think it's ubiquitous yet like we're seeing with security. And I think there's a real opportunity there.
Maybe to pick up a little bit on that, I think I'm really excited about where the technology is going to go with privacy-enhancing technologies and the opportunities there. I think, again, a growing space, but just not only scanning from a threat perspective and a security perspective, but a better, more secure way to leverage the information that you have and capitalize on it, and see what you can do to minimize use of actual personally identifiable information and still deliver a really high-quality product. I think that space is going to be really exciting.
Just to extend what we were talking about a moment before, is like collaboration, communication. We continue to enhance. That is super important. But also it is slightly unreasonable to expect that everybody would understand security, because security at the end of the day is a domain which needs its own expert understanding. Not everybody understands what security is all about. But I believe that AI could help us with that, to detect security misconfiguration in a system, or accesses that weren't supposed to be happening either by the software or by the agent, right? And how artificial intelligence can see behavior anomalies in the system and can either block them or detect them. So I'm expecting future in security and privacy, the AI would be able to help us there by making the system more intelligent and helping the workforce cover their gaps in some way by making the system more smarter and intelligent.
Yeah, the last two things I would add is keep getting out and talking to the team members. They know the workarounds. They know how the systems work, and you could build as great as controls, but if someone sends an Excel spreadsheet and does it something differently than you want, you've just wasted millions of dollars. And then lastly, a lot of our controls are based on math. Quantum computing is going to change our control set today. It's just going to change it, and it's going to be different because technology evolves, and therefore we need to evolve. We need to be as far left or as a little bit more predictive than we are today. So people are important, but don't forget about the math and the technology. That's why we're all here, is to learn from each other.
Terrific. Well, I guess just maybe, Chris, we've got just a couple more minutes here. I mean, are there any things that you've tried that you feel like they didn't go the way you were hoping, and you would that might be a takeaway as well?
Oh yeah. As I talked about communication, that's key to getting things done. So I'm a big sports person, so I played football and basketball, and I come into my new team of 100 or people or so, and I talk about, all right, we're on the 50-yard line. There's 2 minutes to go in the game. We have to do these kind of passes, and we need to get outside and out of bounds. And people are looking at me like, who are you? They are musicians, and they are Dungeons and Dragons people and all these other things. So I couldn't use my 50 years of experience playing sports because it didn't relate. So knowing your audience. So I had to go learn about different aspects and go game with them. Go and figure out what makes them tick. So think about your audience. Think about how you're communicating, because it's about their lens, not your lens, right? It's just like your client. Solve your client's problems, not your problems. So my eyes were open. Totally. This is the first team I've gotten on where I didn't have basketball players and football players and lacrosse and soccer. Again, and they told me, they're like, Chris, we don't understand what you're saying. Sports ball? What is that? So again, communicating in the language of the people that you're talking to.
Great.
I think, expanding on that a little bit in a similar vein, the roles that I've had where I'm supporting work internationally, that gets brought to the table very quickly too, because there are striking cultural differences that are the basis and the foundation for all of these different laws that are coming out. And if you cannot appreciate that, then you cannot get in the mentality of both the customers who happen to be located in those geographies, but then also the regulators who are going to come around and look at things from their perspective. And so just widening your reach, I think, just to amplify that point, and think about sort of the origin of where something is coming from can get you very far along. It can be challenging if you sort of sit in a very isolated way and kind of look at things from your perspective and be very convinced that you are correct and this is the only way to think about it.
Terrific.
The point that I would add is the more awareness of knowing that you may not know everything, and bringing the right set of experts into the room goes a long way, right? It's when we start feeling that we don't need anybody else in the room and we are self-sufficient is where the gaps started to creep in. But if we are just aware that, yes, for this thing I need to bring in legal, for this thing I need to bring an expert into the room and help me out with collaboration and communication, that'll help us learn from each other and be more secure and private.
Yeah, for me, this is a little adjacent, but I spent a long time in the government on the other side of the table with customers or vendors, and now I'm on the other side of the table talking to customers all the time. And I bring that experience, and I think about that a lot when I'm having those conversations about what did I want to hear when I was evaluating a SaaS platform or a security platform or thinking about privacy. What are the things that were important to me? And so I try to flip roles while I'm in those conversations and just be as candid as possible about where we can help, where we're not there yet, or where a customer could go solve their own problem. And so I think that applies not just to security and privacy, but that's something I've been learning.
Terrific. Well, we're almost ready to wrap up. I want to ask one more quick question, which is just, what's something that you're optimistic about in terms of, the future of security and privacy and, how those things are interrelated?
I'll go first. For me, I'm excited that security is now kind of part of how we work. I think for a long time it was something that happened after the fact, and I know this is kind of common to this room, but it is exciting because right now you can't really do software development, cloud deployments, infrastructure development, network design if you're not thinking about security. And so I think this is gonna increase the pace of innovation because we're not having to stop and start, and hopefully reduces the amount of time and money spent on dealing with bad security.
Almost the same point. We have been, as an industry, we have been seeing networking and storage, the other two domains, as necessity to run something. And so they were baked into the earlier cycle of development. But security was, oh, we will take care of it later. We don't have to worry about day one on security. But now that landscape is changing, that mindset is changing. And people are becoming more and more aware that when they write the first line of code, the security starts from there itself. And so that awareness, the regulations that are coming in, the products that are coming in would fuel more innovation and more attention to the security. And so it won't be any more an afterthought. It will be like baked into the process itself.
Yeah, I like the idea that when this is done well, when we get it right, this is, I believe, truly a brand differentiator. I think people who take this seriously and can come together and collaborate and come early in the design process and have the culture around them and the organization around them, customers are smarter. They get smarter and smarter every day. And they're going to want to find the entities that prioritize this, who really put the resourcing behind it. And so I think this kind of connectivity across our teams really just fuels that mission. And it's a nice spot to be in where, legal is typically a cost center, right? We're not the ones who are bringing in wild revenues for the company, but I think this is helping us now tell the story about how we play a really central role in product development and innovation and, achieving the company's objectives in a way that, historically it took us some time to get there, but the kind of partnership that we can have with security really driving that message home is exciting to me.
I'll say I'm most optimistic about board level involvement in what we're doing. I talk to the board 4 times a year, and they're interested. It's, Chris, you've got 15 minutes, and we end up talking for 40. Because I said, Jay, I'll talk for 2 minutes, and then I'll answer questions. Jay's our CEO. And we end up getting great questions like, hey, this just happened. What are we doing about it? Could this happen to us? These are the things I'm concerned about. So when we talk to our senior leaders, number 1 concern, team member safety. Number 2 concern, client data. Number 3 concern, regulatory. Number 4 concern, operational. You did not hear that 5 years ago. You did not hear that 5 years ago in most companies. So now this is a board level discussion, whether you're talking to the audit committee, the board, the CEO, the COO, the CFO, they all care and they want to help. So I'm so optimistic because it's changed the mindset of our most senior leaders. And those are the ones that can invest with the resources to do it the right way.
Great. Well, thank you so much, and thanks everyone for the great comments and insights here. And thanks to everyone who watched the panel. I thought this was really great, and just thanks everyone.
Thank you so much.